So what I'm going to do in this session is talk a little bit about the kind of timeline for a master's course and how that's going to affect your career planning. We're going to look at how you think about your career choice, a little bit about what employers are looking for and the next step, and something about how we help you prepare for that next step. One of the issues about doing a master's course is that no sooner are you here than we're trying to encourage you to think about when you're going to leave, because you're only on a master's course for a year, and that year will go incredibly quickly. So unless you begin to think very swiftly once you arrive, and actually ideally even before you arrive, about what the master's is going to do for you, what you want to plan to do afterwards, think through some of your options and the kind of route into those options, then you're in danger of going through your master's course and then suddenly getting to the end of it or near to the end of it and realizing you're out of sync with everything else that's going on in terms of applications, whether it's to further study or to jobs. So it's really important, more so than on any other higher education course where you've got a little bit more time, really important to be focused when you're on a master's course and to really kind of think through what your plans are and what you want to be doing. So I'm going to start by looking a little bit at timelines so that you get some sort of an idea of how that time is going to go and the different kind of key stage points within that time. So if we look first of all on a typical timeline for a master's course, so you kind of arriving hopefully in October, and when you start your course, all new and enthusiastic. The first kind of real major point was going to be January, when a lot of courses will have exams or at least some sort of assessed coursework that has to be handed in. You'll often find that on most master's courses, you will have a taught part of the course and then a research part of the course. So for most of you, the taught part of your course will finish round about Easter. So from the sort of September or October start date through to March, April, that will be when your taught part of your course finishes. And then and that will often be finished by exams again, or coursework, depending on how it's being assessed. And then in May, you'll start probably your research project. And your research project, whatever it's going to be, will continue through from round about April, May time, right through until September, when you hand in your final pieces of work, whether it's a dissertation or whatever the assessed piece of your research project is. So that gets handed in September, and then that's you finished. So that's the kind of nature of the year when you're doing your master's course. Master's courses are very intensive. They pack, there's a lot packed in to that period of time. There's a lot of subject content, there's a lot of teaching, there's your research project. And then on top of that, you've also got to think about what your next stage is as well. So if we then look at a typical timeline for, say, job applications, if you lay this or think about this laid on top of your timeline for a master's course, you can see how intensive it's going to be for you. So you start in October, and in October and early part of November, at most universities, that's when a lot of the activities are happening on campus in relation to employers, graduate opportunities, careers fairs, company presentations, forums, workshops, lots and lots of activity in October and the early part of November, putting students in touch with potential employers. So to give you an example, at Imperial at that time of year, during October, we will have had, by the end of October, we'll have run 3 careers fairs on different sectors, so major careers fairs. So our finance and consulting careers fair, our engineering careers fair, which has about 90 companies come to it, also our technology careers fair. So all of that happens in October. During October also, we have our major program of company presentations. So we would have between round about 4 companies on campus every night during that period of time, doing presentations about their offers in terms of jobs and graduate opportunities for both undergraduates and master's students. So if you're preparing and thinking about where you might be applying to, then not only are you getting to grips with your master's course, but you're attending lots of events that are to do with trying to get a job at the end of your master's as well. By the end of October, end of November, a lot of companies who have structured graduate programs will have their closing dates. So if you don't get your applications in this period, then you basically have to wait for a year before they open their applications again. So that's why we say to you on a master's course, you really have to hit the ground running, knowing what you want to do, knowing or having thought through that, having thought through the types of companies or organisations you might want to apply for. So a whole raft of deadlines by the end of November in terms of job applications. You'll also find in November and the early part of December, if you are thinking of going on to do a PhD after your master's, then this is when you would be getting your applications, your personal statements ready, your research proposals ready, and sending those in for PhD applications. So it's not just for graduate jobs and employment, it's also for carrying on to further study as well. There's a lot of pressure in that first term to get your applications in. So researching, if you're thinking about PhD, researching the institutions you might want to apply to, looking into the subject areas, the research groups, finding out what they're doing, which institutions, which research groups fit with the kinds of things that you're interested in, and getting that application and everything ready. So again, first round interviews for jobs, but also applications for PhDs. And then moving a little bit later into December through to February, that's when the next stages of applications happens for graduate level jobs. So interviews, online tests, assessment centres, all happen round about this period of time. And interviews and further applications for PhDs also happen at round about this time as well. So this is all on top of that timeline when you're kind of preparing for exams, doing coursework, thinking about what your research proposition is going to be for your master's course. You're trying to do all of this at the same time, so a lot of pressure. And then by May and July, you then start getting opportunities and applications available for smaller organisations, the ones that have slightly less structured graduate programmes. And a lot of our students will go into small SMEs, very niche organisations and niche companies, where the vacancies are, I mean, it's good news for the master's students because it takes a little bit of the pressure off, but this is where they would advertise on a more ad hoc basis. And they would be looking for people with, so they might decide round about Easter that they're going to take on somebody, and it would be to start at the end of the summer. So there are opportunities that become available a little bit later in the year as well. But for the large companies, the large organisations that have very structured programmes, this is the sort of cycle of activities laid on top of your master's programme. Okay. So thinking in advance and preparing in advance for your career choice is really important. Some of you may have a fairly firmed up idea about what you want to do. How many of you feel you're in that position? How many think you know exactly what you're going to do after your master's course? Ooh, 2 of you. How many have got a vague notion? Okay, well that's good. How many have got no idea at all, but they just want to do the master's? Oh, a few of those as well. That's fine too. Whatever stage you're at, that's okay, but it is important to begin to think through some of these processes. And there is a kind of a process in career planning and career choice. It's really important that you think about yourself first. What's important to you? What do you enjoy doing? What skills do you have that you like to use? How do you like to interact with people, with the environment, with data, with objects? You know, how structured do you want your work to be? How free? Do you like things that have a kind of clear, defined process? Do you like things that are a little bit more open-ended? So there's all sorts of aspects towards work that you need to be thinking about and understanding how you are going to fit into that kind of environment. Because unless you do this bit first, it's very difficult to make a really good career choice. You know, there's lots of opportunities out there, and you could be applying for lots of opportunities, but if you don't know what your own skills and abilities are and your own interests and motivations and drivers, then it's going to be difficult to make the right choice. So thinking through yourself and what's important to you should come first. I always say it's a little bit like if you're going to buy a pair of shoes, you know, there's lots of choice out there, but you've got to know what size your feet are before you'll get one that are going to be comfortable. And, you know, career choice is a little bit the same. You've got to have an understanding of you as an individual and what's important to you in order to get that right match. You've then obviously got to research your options, and we're very lucky at Imperial in that because we're a very targeted institution, we have a lot of companies and organisations who want to recruit from us, then there are a wide range of opportunities available to you, and there's good access to information and good access to able to talk to companies, able to talk to alumni, find out what other people have done from your course. So that's really very much available to you. Getting ready for the application stage, so making sure things like your CV are really good, covering letters, application forms, preparing for interviews, understanding the sector that you're going into, doing your research into that sector so that you can be informed when you go for an interview. All of that is very important. And then sourcing the opportunities. Again, we're lucky in that we get notified of lots of opportunities at Imperial. The Careers Service has an online database of vacancies that cover all different sectors at all different levels. So there's plenty of opportunity available to you, and then support in applying. Okay? So that's the kind of process that you need to be thinking about, and ideally, you kind of need to be thinking about that before you start on your course, because once you start, you're not going to have that much time. So I would encourage you from now over, you know, the next few months, begin to think through what your goals are and what your plans are. So you need to think a little bit about the subject area you're going to be doing and how is that going to affect your career choice. Is it going to be really important that whatever you do is very closely connected to the subject that you're going to be studying in your master's course? So you need to have thought that through and think, you know, well, what will this course lead on to? And that's the kind of question that when you are investigating courses, you should be asking at the departmental presentations, when you talk to people at the desks, whichever institution it is you're going to, you should be asking, you know, what do people do after they've finished this master's course? And there is quite a lot of information on the Imperial website. We've got a whole section on what past students have done with data from the survey that we conduct every year, showing exactly the kinds of job titles, the kinds of companies or organisations that our students have gone into. And that's both at undergraduate level and at master's level. Hi.
Sorry to interrupt. Just this survey you do,
Yeah.
your students who graduated, do they have to fill out, or is that voluntary?
The survey, it's a survey that every university in the UK does. It's called the Destination of Leavers from Higher Education. We have to do the survey. It's part of our funding requirements from the government. And we have to get an 80% response rate. So we will pursue our students in the same way that any university will. Particularly for home students, we have to get an 80% response rate. So we do phone people up after they've graduated and say, tell us what you're doing.
Interesting to know in terms of statistics.
Yep, yeah.
If people need to reply or not, because
Well, if you don't, you'll just get pestered until you do reply. But it's very valuable data. I mean, the government wants the data, obviously, but also for us, it's very valuable for supporting our own students and our prospective students. So we can be actually saying, we know that of this cohort of students, X number are gone on to further study, X number are working, these are the kinds of jobs they're doing. So it's really, it's valuable data for us. And actually, we usually exceed our 80%. We usually get, it depends a little bit from course to course, but we usually get on average about 85 to 90% response rate. So whether that's because we've got a good relationship with our students or whether we're very persistent in getting it, I don't know. But it's very good data, and it's all there, and it's in the public domain. So, and it's broken down by department, so you can see what people from our master's courses go on to do. Okay. So thinking about the kinds of jobs and how much your subject area is going to kind of channel you down a particular route. And you'll find that jobs for graduate level come in sort of like, I guess there'd be sort of like 3 different categories. There are jobs where you absolutely have to have that subject in order to do that job. So I guess some areas of engineering, so something like if you want to be a civil engineer, you've got to have civil engineering because you have to get chartered status. So there's no kind of choice in it. That's a given. But there are also jobs where your discipline area is going to be useful, but it's not an absolute requirement. So for instance, if you were doing something like, let's take an example, something like chemistry, and you went to work for, say, a pharmaceutical company, but you went to work in their marketing department, then you will not be using your chemistry as an everyday part of your job, but the fact that you've got that background knowledge may well help you actually market the products better. So you know the language, you know the environment, you know the terminology. So that background understanding is going to help you in that particular area, but it's not a requirement. And then there are jobs where any discipline applies. And interestingly, probably 45% of all graduate level jobs are open to students from any discipline area. So, that widens up your choice enormously. And we always have students who think, oh, okay, I've really enjoyed my undergraduate course, I've really enjoyed my master's course, but actually, you know what, I've had enough of that subject now, I'm going to do something different. And what we encourage them to do is look at how they've developed their skills by doing that particular course that will then channel them into other career areas. So there's a big choice of what's available to you. You also need to think about what you enjoy doing. So what have you really enjoyed from your master's program, or will you enjoy from your master's program? What have you enjoyed from your undergraduate degree? What kind of activities, parts of the subject knowledge, the skills that you had to use, which bits of it really resonated for you and gave you a particular interest. And then don't forget your extracurricular activities. Many, many people will actually end up being channeled into a career or going into a career area, perhaps more determined by other things that they've got involved in at university other than the actual discipline area. So don't ignore those things. And actually, you know, the perfect scenario is to combine them and find a job that maybe combines your academic interests with your other interests. So kind of think about the whole of what you get up to and the whole thing that you're interested in and try and look at what might be available for that. So interests and skills and abilities, what do you like to do and what would you prefer to avoid is quite important as well. And then think about the industry sectors that those things are going to fit into. So any kind of given discipline area may well have application in quite a wide variety of different industry and work sectors. So I mentioned something like civil engineering. Well, yes, that clearly has an importance within the construction industry, But similarly, you could work in something like consultancy with a background in civil engineering. You could work in the finance sector with a background in civil engineering, specializing in, working with that particular industry sector. So there's all sorts of crossovers between sectors and the ways that you can use your discipline in a variety of different ways. And then think about what's going to motivate you and keep you enjoying your work, because that's the kind of thing that we're all striving for, is to actually get into something that we really enjoy and you feel excited about doing on a daily basis. So what is actually going to really get you out of bed in the morning and get you off to work? What's going to give you that job satisfaction? And that's going to be different for different people. For some people, it could be the money. Going after the big bucks can be very important for some people. It could be things like intellectual challenge, how fast-moving is the area that you're going into, how much change is there, is the sector going to be at the cutting edge of that particular discipline. Things like work-life balance might be important, contribution to society. There's all sorts of different things, and it's going to be different for each one of you. What is really going to be that deciding factor. But it's important to think these things through as well, because if you find yourself doing a job in a sector or an industry area that you actually don't feel comfortable with, then it's not a particularly enjoyable experience. I think, the ideal situation is that whatever you go on to do is going to combine all of these aspects to get the really good fit. It's important also while you're here or while you're at university to actually be thinking about some of the other things that employers are going to be looking for. And this will have been, you may well have heard of all of these things if you're doing an undergraduate degree at the moment, but it also applies if you're doing a master's or a PhD. It's exactly the same. The way that a lot of companies and organizations make that final selection is by looking at the other kinds of skill areas. If they're recruiting from a place like Imperial, they're going to assume that you're very bright, that you've got a very good academic track record. If they're recruiting from a particular master's course or subject area, they're going to assume that you have that subject knowledge or that technical knowledge. That's almost going to be a given. And what a lot of organizations do is they look at these other areas in order to then differentiate between you. So making sure that you have thought through how you develop these other skills and how you can give evidence for these other skills is particularly important. So things like self-management, we call it, team working, business and customer awareness, problem solving, these are all pretty much universal skills that all employers and organizations are looking for. And it's really important that while you're doing your master's course, that you're thinking about how you can be giving evidence and how you can be developing these particular skills. Also things like communication and literacy. That sounds very basic, but it is about things like can you communicate appropriately for different types of audiences? Most of you, I guess, will be doing quite technical subjects. So can you communicate technical ideas to lay audiences? How good are you at that kind of communication? Because that's what happens in a work environment. You're not always going to be talking to people who've got a similar knowledge set to yourself. So it's being able to interpret and explain things. Being able to write reports, persuasive reports, are also going to be important skills. And application of numeracy and number, and IT and technology, and how good you are in those sorts of areas. Now, we're very lucky in that the kind of discipline areas that we have at Imperial means that a lot of these things, you're going to get lots of exposure to it on your actual course. But you also have to understand how those can be used in a work environment as opposed to just an academic environment as well. So the other kinds of things that you should be thinking about is from your course, how do you then interpret these skills, but also from other activities that you get involved in. So at Imperial, there's lots of opportunity to be involved in things like clubs and societies. I think at the last count, we had about well over 300 different clubs and societies. There's volunteering opportunities. There's opportunities to get involved in promoting STEM subjects, going back into schools, working with our partner schools in encouraging students at school to do STEM subjects. So there's all sorts of different activities that you can get involved in while you're on your course that actually helps to develop some of these particular skill sets. So there's plenty of opportunity. And it's really important to, even though the master's year is quite a packed year, to try and get involved in some way. And what employers are really looking for is not just sort of passive involvement. It's not a case of joining a society. It's a case of actually trying to help that society run, helping to organise things, being kind of proactive with whatever you get involved in. So there's plenty of opportunity to kind of develop all of these skills and provide evidence for all of these skills. Other ways that we help you, I'm nearly running out of time, so we've got a very, very large support program through the Careers Service to help with your career development. We run a whole range of obviously one-to-one appointments and advice sessions. We work centrally and we also work in departments. So whichever department you're applying to, you'll find that some people from the Central Careers Service will be in that department, helping you develop your skills, helping you think about your career choice, working with you individually and also in small groups and in lectures and seminars. We've got information resources, very extensive careers website. We have an online system for vacancies and employers. I think at the last count, we had about 7,000 employers registered, actively registered with our Jobs Live system, who are kind of seeking students from Imperial. And we also have a very extensive events program to put you in touch with those different organisations that you could be applying to. So to sum up, your year will go very, very quickly. And you really have to kind of think through and plan for that and make sure you're getting your applications and thinking about your future at the right time. Thinking about what other sorts of things could you be involved in, using things like summer vacation to get some work experience, using your research project on your master's course to make contact with potential employers. It's a great way to get a foot in the door. If you say, I'm doing a research project, can I come and talk to somebody about what I'm doing? Using the contacts that the departments have, the research contacts as well, to make contact with people and to express an interest. So there are a whole range of different opportunities through the career service, through your departments, through the subject area that you're doing, through things like conferences and collaborative seminars, etc., with other institutions. Lots of opportunities to make links and network. And I think particularly at postgraduate level, more than maybe at undergraduate level, it's using those networking skills are going to be very important to get exactly that job that you, or that PhD that you're particularly interested in.